Well, thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Justin Stern, and I'm going to talk to you all about creating an academic course in conflict resolution, mediation, and restorative justice. Just kind of going over my experience in creating that course, teaching it for the last year and a half, and some of the things that kind of popped up in not only creating it, but in actually teaching some of the challenges and some of the successes we had. So just a little about me real quick. So I am a senior specialist or associate director for student conduct and conflict resolution over Illinois State. And I'm a lecturer over in criminal justice sciences over at the university as well too. So in case some people think I did not make a leap to the faculty side and completely leave student affairs behind, I am. My primary job, as my boss likes to remind me, is in student conduct still. I also primarily oversee the conflict resolution side of the house as well in our office. So in addition to regular case management, conflict resolution is my kind of specialty aspect in there too.
Are you an attorney?
I am not an attorney. No, I'm working on my doctorate in higher ed right now. I am past my comprehensive exam, so someday at some point soon I'll have those three little letters after my name. We'll see how that goes. So real quick, just to kind of let you know what we're going to talk about today. Kind of the background and creation of the course, the assessment of the course, and then just kind of the future of where the course is going right now. Because there is actually some tweaks here and there that actually happened even in the last 2 weeks. That kind of changed some of the future direction of the course. So I'm excited to kind of share some of that stuff with you all as well too. So a little bit of information, kind of let you all know where the course kind of came from and how it was stemmed at least. So when I started over at Illinois State about a little over 4 years ago now, we did have a conflict resolution program in place at the time. But there was a lot of discussion about if that conflict resolution program was going to stay in place. I'm sure a lot of you who have conflict resolution programs on campus can empathize with some of the concerns we had, primarily about budgetary concerns. Did we have money to still fund this program? Was it an actual successful program? Were students accessing it? And at the same time, we ran into a couple unique issues that I feel actually some of you probably also experienced as well too, that for a large portion of our CR program, we were using volunteers to do mediation and restorative justice, and we were using student volunteers. And that came into a lot of question about, we didn't always have a lot of cases to hand out, which isn't always a bad thing. But when it comes to CR, if you don't have a lot of cases to hand out, it's kind of hard to keep your volunteers interested and keep their skills sharp. So those were a lot of the concerns that started to really pop up early on and just stayed systemic throughout the entire course of the program. In addition, because we were primarily using students, getting just the training alone for mediation was a challenge into itself. We were doing in-house training at the time, so part of that was we have minimum 40-hour training. How do we convince students show up for 40 hours on top of your classes for something that was a non-certifying program at the time? Sorry about that. I had a little error on my computer pop up I want to get rid of. Sorry about that. So in addition to, hey, you're not going to get credit for this, it's also not a certifying program through any kind of court system at all. That was also a huge hurdle we had to clear. We had a lot of students who just couldn't find the 40 hours, in addition to the fact if there was no real incentives other than just getting the skills, what is that going to look like really? We had a couple outside stakeholders that really had a high interest in us developing this a lot more. Our actual McLean County, the county that our court is in, had asked us a little bit more like, can you find some more mediators that you can certify in the program, because we need more mediators for our ADR program, the alternative dispute resolution program they had. So that was kind of a unique thing into itself. I was actually getting that request from the court to try and find a better way to do this as well. In addition, we have a peace and conflict resolution studies minor at ISU, but they didn't have any kind of practical application skills course. It was really just a lot of theoretical conversations, not even really on a micro scale, but more on a kind of an over global scale, at least in terms of how a lot of those things were working. So a lot of different people were interested in seeing something developed. We just didn't have anything in place at the time. So that's kind of where a lot of these conversations start to begin about how can we start to tackle these issues. In addition, something that's not actually on the PowerPoint I'm going to talk about a little bit after as well, we went through a code revision. And in that code revision, we decided two things. One, that we were changing the name of our office to Student Conduct and Conflict Resolution. At the time, we were known as Community Rights and Responsibilities. And in addition, the code actually called for what we call conflict resolution specialists, which is basically the code dictating we are going to have people trained in mediation and restorative justice to facilitate these processes on our campus. So the pressure was on a little bit, if we're going to have conflict resolution in our name, we need to actually do conflict resolution. And if the code's going to dictate we have these people in place to do the facilitative or the facilitation of these processes, we need to find these people. And it specifically called it needed to be students, so we couldn't tap faculty or staff to do some of these. So we had tried to see if that loophole was there, and it was not. Sorry about that. There we go. So one of the ways that we tried to resolve this matter a little bit was I went about creating a registered student organization at our university called Redbirds Resolving Conflict. This was an undergraduate and graduate student organization that I had worked with them to do mediation restorative justice training. The picture actually right up there is the first meeting that we had. So I was also surprised to see the room with over 30 people in there. I expected it to be a much smaller group of people. In addition to that, part of the conversations we had about was, well, what is training going to look like? Do you all have the time commitment to actually do the training? Obviously, the numbers started to dwindle once we kind of broke down, hey, you need to be here for like 40 hours or so on top of some restorative justice training as well. But the picture actually in the upper left was the first group that actually passed our training. They came in on Friday nights, they came in on weekends to train with me to get that stuff done. So I'm always really proud to kind of talk about that first kind of success that we had. But the problem that we kind of ran into was that, again, it wasn't certified. We couldn't say like, hey, the court said like this means you're a mediator. It's just like, hey, ISU is basically just saying, this is great. We're going to give you this mediation certificate. In addition to that, again, because it wasn't a credit class, a lot of students had a really hard time justifying 40 hours of their time, especially on Fridays and weekends. So that was another challenge that kind of came up as well. The good thing about resolving conflict that did actually resolve some of our issues was that it did allow us to do a lot more community outreach that we weren't able to do as an office. Even though we have a larger office on our campus for the Dean of Students office, as the person who was pretty much doing all the CR work, that was a unique challenge. I couldn't get out into the community. We didn't have the resources to do that. They were able to do that. In addition, they also created a really good catalyst for the course actually being created by doing an annual conflict resolution week. The picture actually in the bottom left is we did a screening of the movie 13th, and we actually did a panel of faculty and staff that I sat on to talk through how conflict resolution, especially restorative justice, played into that movie and the issues that it was talking about. And that was a really good jumping off point for us to build the course and get more faculty interested as well, too. So kind of looking back a little bit on the timeline, we did have a kind of crash course in mediation, and I'm going to call it a crash course, during the summer of 15, where we had 40-hour training that, again, wasn't certified through any of the courts at all, that students would go through. We had faculty, staff, we had people in the community go through it as well. A lot of people were really just interested in learning more about the process. To my understanding from talking to people afterwards, not all of them really put that into practice. There was a lot of people just interested in the community about what does this really look like. But that did at least kind of set the foundation for us building a syllabus, building some of the curriculum, and we already had some of the faculty connections as well too, so that did help the situation. A lot of the conversations I had was with our ISU staff and faculty. I met with numerous departments trying to get feedback for what they were looking for if we did something like this, especially which department could house us. Our provost did advise us that as we were in student affairs, we couldn't host our own academic course for credit. So I had to find a department that I could basically sell this to and then fund us for it. So that was a very interesting conversation, series of conversations that I had. In addition to that, a lot of non-ISU stakeholders as well too. I worked very closely with our McLean County court system, their chief judge as well, Judge Fitzgerald. And eventually we ended up getting to a point where after meeting with several other academic departments, we found our home in the School of Social Work. They had a revolving course that was topical, and they were able to put us in for that semester. They didn't have a topic, so we got that one. In addition, we also ended up talking to a lot of other departments about how can we best form this curriculum to make sure we're serving not only the students, but your interests as well in the campus community. So talking to our gender studies department, talking to our peace and conflict, obviously. We talked to our college student personnel. We talked to even our PK-12 teacher prep programs about what can we be doing to make sure that we are building curriculum that you think your students are going to be interested in, and that you'd also allow them to get credit as well too for their actual degree. So that was also kind of the selling points. How can we build some of this in there as well? The School of Social Work offered us to let us start in fall 16, so we have been teaching it for the last year and a half. And they actually helped us put it into the spring as well afterwards. Originally, they didn't have that plan, but we had a pretty successful first semester. And they said, why not? Let's keep going. So I wasn't going to complain about it. The logistical considerations we had to kind of take into account was a couple different things that some of the other courses they had taught really didn't have to take into consideration. For anyone who's ever been in any kind of mediation or restorative justice training or taught any of those things, space is really important. You need to make sure you have space to break out into practice sessions, and that was something that kind of dealing with that we had to kind of explain. Even though we have a class of, let's say, 10, we need a bigger facility to spread out. And that was something working with like our facilities to help them understand why we actually needed that space, and that was a whole other separate conversation I had to have, because they typically plan out where you have 10 students, you're going into a smaller room. The time as well, we ended up deciding that we were going to teach the course for once a week for a 3-hour period. That was one of the time slots we ended up using. The reality was that when it ended up coming down to we're going to teach it, 2-3 times a week or the one night a week, it was really about, if we're getting into this, if we're going to get the practice skills, we need them to make sure that they're invested. We need to make sure that we're setting up an environment where they're able to get interested, and it's not, hey, 15 minutes later, you're leaving. Because by then, we're just starting to get into some of the real meat of a lot of the conversations we're having as well. And a lot of the discussions actually really went well, I think, with the longer classes. And we did end up going pretty much to 3 hours every single class. So unfortunately, I know some of my undergrad students weren't too thrilled, but I think they thought they were going to get out early, but that was at least the way it ended up running. And the facilitation style as well. A lot of my practice is grounded in conflict resolution. I end up teaching a lot of those same styles as well. So a facilitation model, when I set up class, I set it up as, we're going to set ground rules in terms of like what you expect from me, what I expect from you, what we expect from each other. And I think that built a really good culture in the class for them to feel open to have conversations, to challenge each other, to challenge me, which I found really important. And through the feedback that I got from the course evaluations as well, that was something that was consistently mentioned. The fact that they felt that this was an environment where they were able to learn and practice their skills in a supportive environment. They didn't feel this was something that they were nervous to deal with. And even my preliminary assessment that I did in the beginning of the semester showed that a lot of them weren't too thrilled to go do conflict resolution stuff, because they weren't very comfortable with a lot of it. So that was a really good building block to get them into that place where they could do those things and feel like, I'm comfortable enough, I can do this, I can explore this. So for the fall 2017 semester, we ended up transitioning to criminal justice sciences. The reason for this was, for one, social work needed to change the course. So we had to move, and which means we had to find a new home. Criminal justice sciences was just a logical connection for us to make. The budget was something that obviously was important as well too. Criminal justice sciences felt that they had a real student body push to get our course in there, and it ended up working out really well because we had 23 students actually enroll in the class. I capped it at 20, but we allowed for 3 overrides because, well, we only have 3. Why not? We can make it work. Especially with the first semester, I was looking to annoy my chair. The need as well too, we had a lot of people within criminal justice sciences ask their chair for us to move the course in there so we could kind of fine tune some of the curriculum for what they needed as well. Some of the evaluations that I'm going to go over towards the end of the presentation are going to talk through how a lot of the criminal justice sciences were obviously thinking about going into the police department, going into the police force at some point. And they were really excited for us to talk through how conflict resolution really plays into the work of police officers. And that was actually kind of a trending theme throughout the entire course as well. So that was something really enjoyable to kind of see them involved too. So in terms of the course learning outcomes, and just so you all know, I already uploaded the syllabus into the session materials as well too. It's a lengthy syllabus, as my students like to remind me, but we have a pretty all-encompassing policy with our institution. We have to have a lot of things in there, and some of those policies aren't short. So, but at least for the course learning outcomes, we had actually just retooled these recently, where it's to describe the values and empirical theories of mediation and restorative justice, developing an actual academic course. I decided that it wasn't a great idea just to work on practical skills, and that was it. The academic side of the